Hey, welcome back to another episode of I'm Not Running for Congress. I'm your host, Don Baisley. Thanks for joining us. We're recording this episode on June 10th, and we're only about 2 weeks away from the big New York State primary, and we continue to follow District 23 in the race for Congress there. We've already had the two Democratic candidates that are running in the primary on an introductory forum, I guess you could call it, and today joining us once again is Democratic candidate Gies, who's running for Congress in District 23. Aaron, welcome back to I'm Not Running for Congress.
Hi, Don. Thanks for having me. Good to be back. This is great.
Well, as I just said, the primary is right around the corner. I believe early voting starts real soon, maybe this week, I think. You can fill us in on that. But
it starts on Saturday.
Early voting starts. So since we spoke to you last time, which was several months ago, we kind of did an introductory chat here the first time you were on. Tell me, what are you seeing out there? That's the main thing I want to bring with this program is kind of reports from what's happening out there. So tell me what's happening out there on the campaign trail in District 23, New York.
So we've started to knock doors in a big way to canvass for the primary. And I know in Erie County, they've done over the last couple of weekends canvasses where they knock hundreds of doors. Tioga and Allegheny are knocking doors now. We've done some knocking in Cattaraugus and Chautauqua just this week. So we're now in the up over 1,000 contacts with voters, and we're asking people what their big issues are and whether they plan on voting and who they plan on voting for. And we're finding lots of support and also lots of frustration with how things are going now, especially about high costs.
That's actually my big question. As of a couple of days ago, I looked up. I'm kind of curious how things are going with people that are been historically Republican and or independent. I think those two groups make up a lot of the district. The district is not reliably Democrat. As I said last time, the Cook Political Report is still calling this a safe seat for Nick Langworthy. I'm sensing that prediction is inaccurate in terms of what's happening. What are you finding out there with people that would consider themselves not necessarily aligned with Democrats? You running as a Democrat, what are you finding with those folks?
So we're way over 100 public events at this point. We're probably up around 115 or so, 120. And there's always about 5% Republican in the room. So there's always somebody that comes up to me after and says, I'm a lifelong Republican, but, and what they say after, it's kind of an even split. Like there are folks that are offended at the kind of moral decline, in Washington and how much corruption and graft there is, how socially acceptable lying seems to have become for public officials, including Nick Langworthy. But there's an equal number, I think, who are, just really concerned about their personal economic reality. I don't know how I'm going to pay for my XYZ. Often it's healthcare. People's healthcare costs have just become crazy and prohibitive for a lot of folks.
That's interesting that you mentioned that specifically because I wanted to shift gears. Last time you were here, we talked kind of introducing you as a candidate, where you're coming from philosophically. We didn't really drill into issues. And today I want to talk at least about a couple of issues. And the one that's nearest to me, which I think really impacts all Americans almost, is healthcare. And so for you, if you are elected to Congress, what do you stand for in that area? What's your vision for healthcare in the United States?
Yeah, so thank you. I think healthcare, first of all, I think it's the number one issue for the campaign, simply because everybody's costs are going up. At the same time, in this district, their access is going down. Since 2024, we've lost 5 of our nursing homes in the district. And so, at a time where we need to be adding beds at a really high rate because baby boomers are retiring, we're actually losing beds. And that means that people that actually live there have to find another place to live, which is an awful situation that you don't want to see families have to navigate. So what I am for healthcare that is accessible and affordable for everyone. I think that conservatives and liberals agree on that. I think that based on my experience, my conservative neighbors don't think that people should die of preventable diseases because they are poor or live in a rural area. I think we agree that every family deserves to have a doctor. And, having a doctor means, first of all, there's a doctor in your area, which is not guaranteed for everybody in New York County. And second of all, you can afford to go see that doctor. And right now we've got families of three that are paying for their own health insurance that are paying, I know a family is paying $39,000 a year. Family of three for a high deductible healthcare plan, basically just for the right to get sick. And that's unacceptable and it's unsustainable. Like most folks just can't pay that. And so they don't. And that ends up costing everyone more. So because, you land in the ER and you're already sick. So what I'm for is, first of all, shoring up the system that we already have. On day one, I think Congress needs to work on restoring those ACA tax credits, simply to stabilize the operating budgets of our rural healthcare system. Second of all, I want to use this opportunity where healthcare is so broken to fight for something better, something that we've never had before, universal, accessible healthcare, where we can get rid of most insurance and we have a single payer system.
Of course, the big question: how do we pay for that? That would be, the Republicans would say, or any opponents to universal health care would call it socialism. And where is this money going to come from to pay for health care for 300 million Americans?
Well, how are we paying for what we have, Don? We're not paying for it. Billionaires can get the best healthcare in the world, and they fly all over the world to see whatever specialist they want to see. But regular people are, not paying the cost of a Toyota Camry for healthcare every year, like those folks I was talking about. So Americans are, those that are able to access them are accessing government programs like Medicaid, the VA, and Medicare. And those that aren't are trying to cobble together some kind of access to doctors and medicine. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There are some things that markets aren't very good at delivering. Roads, for example. We tried free market roads in the 1920s. And you know what happened? It didn't work. And it took government investments after World War II for us to get the great roads and highways and bridges that we have now. That's not socialism. That's recognizing the markets aren't good for everything. The same is true of healthcare if you don't want people to die just because they're poor.
One thing that's interesting, I'll just kind of throw out this anecdote, maybe get a reaction from you, is like, I want to do an episode on this program about healthcare. And what I want to do is actually argue a conservative argument for universal healthcare. And here's where I'm coming from with that. Businesses right now spend millions and millions of dollars on providing healthcare and making that part of their employment. And so universal healthcare would take that burden off of the business end. And I never hear that. I never hear that argument. It's actually what I call a conservative argument, a pro-business argument for universal health care. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, is it crazy?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I would add to that by saying, the tax credits that businesses get for providing healthcare, they don't cover all their costs, right? That the businesses do pay for their employees' healthcare. So you're right about that. First of all, universal healthcare would take that burden away. But the tax credits that they get, we have to make up that revenue somehow. So who's paying for that? You are. So it's not cost free. And so what we're doing is we're transferring wealth to mostly big, rich companies that can afford to offer benefits from all the rest of us. So working families are paying for the healthcare of the middle class, while they can't necessarily pay for healthcare themselves because they don't have those kinds of jobs. What you do with universal healthcare is you free up, working families to do the kinds of jobs that they want to do. Middle class people can now not have to work a job that they hate, just so they can have healthcare. And business owners are free to be more entrepreneurial and invest. And they're not tied to making those huge investments in healthcare just to maintain their employees.
Well, getting back to, what are you finding out there on the trail? On this specific issue, if you are promoting universal health care, what are you finding with those independent, conservative people who at least are open-minded enough to be thinking about other options. I mean, what are those, the more traditional people's reaction? They're used to hearing that that's socialism. What are you hearing from those people today? I mean, are they buying this or no?
Well, I mean, I should say, like, yeah, I'm not hanging out in a lot of spaces that are dominated by conservatives. And so, that there's some selection bias, right? The 5% Republicans in a room full of Democrats, they're already familiar with what Democrats think about healthcare access, right? So they're not pushing back super hard. But, the few conservatives that I have talked to about it, the attitude is similar to what you'll find from Democrats. They will say, oh, that would be great, but Washington can't get it done. Or that would be great, but the big corporations will never let it happen. And you know what? They're absolutely right that to make this happen, we would need a major paradigm shift in Washington. We would need Congress to be much more aggressive. And that probably means that, the first step is working hard to get dark money out of politics.
That actually is a transition into my next thing. My next question would be, when you go to Washington, let's assume you win in November and you're going to represent the district. How are you going to play in Washington? I mean, the world of politics in Washington is made up of allegiances, I believe, and, allies and who you're going to play with. And when I just heard you speaking about the healthcare situation, I'm aware that, a major part or major portion of Democratic leadership, party leadership, is pro health insurance industry, and that's why we don't have. So as a congressman, what can you do as one of hundreds of other congresspeople? What's different? What could be different with you in Congress that's not happening today?
So it starts with how I run. So I've decided not to take money from PACs that are aligned with health insurance or drug companies. It's hard to call someone out and to demand accountability from them if you start by saying, please, may I have several $1,000s, right? So I'm setting myself up to be a member of Congress that's able to have integrity on these issues. Maybe the second thing is just who I am. So Congress has lots of lawyers in it. Lawyers are sort of trained to ask the professional question, like, can we make an argument for it from the law? Or, more pejoratively, can we get away with it? Or can we help our client get away with it? Entrepreneurs, there's lots of business owners or sons and daughters of business owners in Congress. They ask the question, how do we make money at it? Or with the government, how do we lose money at a rate that's acceptable, right? Or more pejoratively, how do we get a piece, right? In my profession, we ask, is it good? Does it help people? That will always be my starting point, because my first principle in politics is treating my neighbor the way I want to be treated. So you'll never see that kind of Machiavellian approach from me, and I'm setting myself up to do that financially. Now, I mean, how do you build coalitions for that, right? So I don't want to be like a lonely voice that everybody kind of agrees with, but nobody stands up alongside. I've seen members of Congress do that, and it's heroic, but it doesn't accomplish anything. John, I think there are hundreds of young Democrats running, some of them in very challenging districts in this cycle. And we are going to see a wave election in November. And they are going to tell the leadership, we want dark money out of politics, and we want universal health care, and we want accountability for our cabinet members and leaders who have broken the law. And that's what we're going to push for. So I don't expect to be doing that myself. I expect to be doing that in a freshman class that may number, in the hundreds.
Great. I'm sensing that I tend to agree with your prediction, and we'll see in November, but I really am, I'm sensing a wave, and I'm also sensing a real potential. I personally am a progressive. I don't necessarily try to push my views on the program here, but I'm sensing a real potential bounce back from the Trump era with policies that will impact and improve the lives of Americans. I'm hopeful for that, and I hope you're going to end up being a part of that. What you mentioned healthcare is the number one issue for you, and I kind of share that it is with me also. what do you sense is the second or third next important issue to people out there? Maybe not yourself, or maybe yourself, but what do you think is the second issue that really needs to be addressed by members of Congress?
It's just costs, the cost of everything. So Tops is selling half pounds of ground beef. That's crazy. And it's not because there's a bunch of one-person households. It's because ground beef is like pushing $8 a pound. And gas is up almost to $5 a gallon now. And now that we've been trading strikes with Iran again, it spike past $5 a gallon. People are saying that this is going to snarl our supply chains for maybe years to come. So we have to do everything we can to lower prices for the American people. And I think that there are some obvious things that the next Congress can do really on day one. So like if you ask me what I would do about high prices, there's really two answers to that. First is Congress needs to take back the tariff power, which belongs to them per the Constitution, because Congress is the one that levies taxes, not the executive. And working families have paid, studies have shown like something like $750, $760 in tariff costs just because of Trump's tariffs over the last year. We can stop that and lower prices for people. The other thing is we need a war powers resolution that effectively brings an end to this stupid and illegal war with Iran. We have to force the president to the table. He's bored by it. We don't care. We need peace because our energy prices are too high and the price of everything else is about to go up because of that.
I don't want to spend too much time in my program talking about other people that aren't here, but at the same time, I think in having this conversation, in running for this seat, we need to at least talk about Nick Langworthy for a minute or two. And I've been looking for, online at least, searching for what he stands for right now, and I can't really figure out. And being you're a little more involved with it, what does he stand? I mean, what is he running on? I think he's running on support, continuing ongoing support for President Trump and anything he wants. Other than that, I don't know what he stands for other than the Beagles, maybe. I found that. But I mean, it's important to acknowledge, like, who are you running against? And what does he stand for? What would he say about you? Like, where do you fit into this competition?
Okay, so what's Langworthy for? So Langworthy has been supportive of the war. Langworthy on the House Oversight Committee has continually backed witch hunts and distractions and refused to hold cabinet members accountable. So when Pam Bondi was there to explain the Justice Department's reticence to release the Epstein files, which Congress demanded that they do by law, Nick Langworthy and many of the other Republicans on the Oversight Committee skipped the hearing so that they would have plausible deniability and not have to ask her questions because they thought it might anger the boss. Langworthy has voted against the War Powers Resolution. So the War Powers Resolution passed, but he didn't have the independence or the courage to say, President Trump, this is a stupid and illegal war. We need to get out of it right now. Instead, as so often, he hid. He hid from the American people. He hid from his responsibility. So what is he going to run on? Yeah, he's going to run on beagles. He's going to run on illegals. So he's for humane treatment for dogs, but not for people. He's going to run on fraud and corruption. So he'll cherry pick stories about fraud that usually involves brown people. He'll put that up there. And he will say, you asked about me. He hasn't said anything about me yet. But he will say that I'm a radical, out of touch liberal. And, from my position as, the son of a carpenter and a school secretary in the center of his district where he lives on the edge in a rich suburb, working at a school, providing access to higher education for kids that come from here, come at me. That's fine. Out of touch, we'll see. We'll see who's out of touch.
I also, before you get to take on Nick Langworthy, you need to face the primary with Kevin Stocker. And I want to ask you about him just for a moment. But before we do that, I want to spend a minute just talking about immigration. I think it's another issue that affects our district in many different ways. And again, we're not going to solve it. It's a very complex problem. I'm aware of that. But what are your views on the current immigration system in the U.S.?
Sure. So, I mean, we have to talk about complex problems. Like you and I have already talked about healthcare. I was talking about education in Jamestown last night. These things are really complex. The Farm Bill is super complex. So, we can't shy away from these things. Immigration, yes, it's complex. Like briefly, my view is that everybody deserves to have their human dignity respected. Everyone in America deserves due process. We don't treat people like they're not human or they're beneath our laws, just like we don't let anyone be above our laws. That's my position. So it's clear that our immigration system doesn't consistently do that. And, the Biden administration honestly abused the asylum process and, didn't have enough accountability for the folks that were coming into the country. And now the Trump administration, without trying to pass any immigration reform, is just trying to solve this problem with a brutal regime of what I think amounts to ethnic cleansing. They're just trying to get folks that they don't consider American enough to leave the country, whether they currently have legal status or not. I think that we need thorough immigration reform. And we knew what to do 40 years ago. We just haven't had the political courage to do it. And that immigration reform should have a path to citizenship for some folks that are here, like folks with TPS status or Dreamers, DACA recipients. And it should have a path to like legal status for some folks who are here. And some folks, like folks that have committed crimes, should be deported. I'm not against that. We also need consistent rules at the border. So there's a clear set of rules for who can come in and why and for how long. And we have to fund the immigration legal system to have accountability for that. Right now, the Trump administration is still firing immigration judges. So they're actively breaking the system that they're complaining about. It's unconscionable. We got to do something about it.
There's actually a pro-business and conservative argument for immigration reform too. That's it. And I'm just commenting on this, I guess, because farmers, for instance, and other industries rely on immigrants. So, I'm just throwing this out there that a reformed system would provide a supply of workers that they currently cannot find. So simply getting rid of the immigrants doesn't seem to be a pro-business solution either. Like in addition to the humanity aspect, of the moral aspects of the system.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, that is something that I've heard from farmers in the district, particularly dairy farmers, because dairy farmers need workers year round. The typical worker visa is 6 months. And so what do? You either can't afford the labor that you employ, or you hire folks who are not here legally. And placing our farmers in moral jeopardy like that just so they can run their business is really a terrible thing for the state to do. And I mean, the American, state. And so, we need reform that supports the businesses that use immigrant labor and also is fair to the immigrants, because of course there are also horror stories about people, picking tomatoes in a state of unfreedom, right? They're functionally indentured servants in places like Florida. Yeah, so it's a concern. And, another thing that we see that's very anti-business with this current crackdown is it's easy to find people who are immigrants at ethnic restaurants. And so ICE and CBP are just arresting people that work at ethnic restaurants, Chinese and Mexican restaurants. That's not the worst of the worst. These folks are pillars of our community, right? They haven't committed crimes. They're making our towns and cities better. So that's another thing that we need to address.
Great. We only have a couple minutes left, and I know I've been following your campaign and trying to follow any campaign that's running to replace MAGA is kind of what I've been following. In following your campaign, it seems obvious that you don't really intend or like to talk about the opponent. You'd rather talk about issues, it seems. It seems that Kevin Stocker has said some things about you, not necessarily terrible things, but he kind of seems to be putting a emphasis on the candidate as opposed to issues. That's my editorial, by the way.
Some of them are pretty terrible.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, how would you compare and or contrast yourself with Kevin Stocker? Because one of you two will win this Democratic primary and take on Nick Langworthy, Republican, in November. What's different between you and Kevin Stocker? And by the way, I have invited Kevin Stocker to be here. I haven't heard back from him yet, but if I do have mine, I'll ask him hopefully this, roughly the same questions. I want to be fair and just give people an idea of where the candidates stand. How would you compare yourself to the person running against you in the primary?
Okay, so I've already mentioned that I think Congress has enough lawyers in it. I don't think we need one more lawyer to figure out how we can get away with it. I think that we need folks that are thinking hard about whether a given policy proposal is good for the American people. And I think that I'm better prepared to do that. Kevin's public statements about, why he's running and what he wants to accomplish in Washington actually tend to be very conservative. I'm not making a big deal out of like who's a former Republican and who's not. But he always says that he wants to take things back. He wants to take things back to the way they were. Like he frequently says when he was a kid. I'm sorry, I don't want to go back to the way things were in the early 60s, right? When women had no independent financial existence from men, and when minorities were considered, fully, didn't have full civil rights. I don't think that we've ever had a democracy in this country that really was thoroughly based on treating our neighbors the way we want to be treated. And so I think we're going to have to build that. I don't think Kevin's thinking about that. He takes progressive positions, but when you ask him for specific policy proposals, he'll come back and say, I'm a fighter. Who cares? Who cares? What are you fighting for? What are you trying to build? We're now making specific policy proposals. We're backing specific legislation, and we're trying to put together a comprehensive framework for what we want to see in this district, how we want to bring positive change to New York 23. We can do so much better, but simply struggling by fighting is not, I think, a plan.
Good. And I have one last question, which is always always the same question. And maybe I took the wind out of your sails there because you gave a very thorough answer. But without me asking, as a final question, without me asking a pointed question, you have the last couple of minutes here to say whatever you'd like on the program and make your case for the voters. Take it away, Aaron.
Okay, so thanks. First of all, let me just say it's very important for you to get out and vote wherever you are in the district, starting on Saturday and on up to Election Day on the 23rd. Even if you don't have an active primary besides this one, it's important to get out and vote. Vote for me. I need your support. I need your support not just to win against Kevin Stocker, but also to show the national establishment, to show the party establishment, the state, that we have a real race here on our hands, that we have momentum, and that this is a campaign that can challenge Nick Langworthy and flip this district blue. That power is in your hands, your hands. And just to be clear, my campaign is about reclaiming the common good and making a good life affordable for everyone in New York 23. So that is about investing in each other, in our communities, and pushing back against a mentality in Washington that simply seeks to subsidize the rich and the companies that they control in hopes that they will somehow make life better for us. I'm done with that. And if you're done with that, you need to get out and vote, not just in November, but in the primary. Thanks.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. That's Aaron Gies, the Democratic candidate, or one of the Democratic candidates running for Congress in New York District 23. Primary day is June 23rd, and early voting starts this Saturday, I believe. So as Aaron said, please get out. I'd like to remind anyone that's listening or watching this video to please like and share and promote the program, if you will. My intention is to try to light the pathway away from MAGA, if you will. And I'm purposely trying to appeal to independent people that are maybe independent-minded. So keep that in your thoughts. And in the next few episodes, I'll probably have some citizens, voters that are active. I wouldn't call them activists necessarily, that are doing different things. And again, I want to shed light on the different work that people are doing to help steer this country in a more positive direction. And once again, Aaron Gies, thank you very much for joining us. Please stay connected, Aaron, if you would, just for a minute after we disconnect here. So be sure to join us next time. And until then, I'm Don Baisley. I'm not running for Congress.